Welcome to Beyond the Ballot, AZ. I'm your host, Tom Collins, Executive Director of the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission.
And I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for Clean Elections.
Today, the political ad spend for 2026, especially in Arizona, and how those ads are actually hitting voters. You know, Gina, we talk about this all the time in our office. We deal with a lot of political advertising. We watch them all. We read them all. What's your favorite thing about Arizona political ads?
I mean, I always love the ads that everybody's wearing a cowboy hat. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've never worn cowboy boots or a cowboy hat in your life. If you're filming a political ad in Arizona, you better put that cowboy hat on.
Yes, you do. That's right. That's true. You know, you don't see as much bolo ties as cowboy hats, but maybe that'll be a thing. I don't know. Maybe that'll be the next trend. Cool. Well, we're going to talk about everything you ever wanted to know about political advertising in Arizona after this break. We're here with Pat Custer from the political team at AdImpact, which is a platform that tracks and reports on political TV, digital, and media ads in real time. Pat, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
No, we're super excited to have you. You know, political advertising is a big deal. And going into a competitive election, we were super excited that you were willing to come on. I want to ask, this is just a big question. You know, we're going to have something like, I think according to AdImpact, $332 million in political spending this cycle in Arizona, and something like $10 or $11 billion nationally. What is that money going to go to?
Yeah, so we're projecting just over $10 billion for the entire cycle, and around that 332 for Arizona. From a media type perspective, a lot of that is going to be going to what we call linear TV, so broadcasting cable. That's going to make up, roughly 60 to 70% of the kind of overall spend within that field. In Arizona, instead of a media type perspective, looking at races, a lot of it's going to be going and drilling into the governor's race and then the competitive House seats that you have. And kind of an interesting tidbit here is for Arizona, this is really the first time in about a decade that you don't have two marquee statewide matchups. I kind of feel bad for anyone living in Arizona over the past 10 years, having either a governor and a presidential or a governor and a Senate. All these specials coming through really have inundated the markets and that landscape with this influx of ad spend. So this is the first time we're just going to have the governor's race being backup and then those two competitive House seats.
Yeah, that's right. I think, like you said, almost a decade or maybe a little over a decade, because it was our Senator John McCain who was last on the ballot, well, for a full term, I should say. And then after, what's triggered that were, filling the vacancies and then the reelections from those. So I know you mentioned linear TV, but what else can we expect in terms of these ads, this paid media here that really voters kind of feel inundated with when we go through the election cycle? And I know sometimes it feels like you just can't escape it, but there's a reason, candidates are paying for those ads because they're effective. So where else are we going to see it besides TV?
You're also going to see this come in within the CTV streaming space. So think of you're watching, Hulu Plus, or you're watching an NFL game on Peacock, those ads that come in that streaming side, there's a greater ability to do kind of precise targeting to individual audiences that doesn't cross through on the broadcast TV side. That's become a really fast growing segment of the political ad space.
I think it's interesting because when I look at your report, I look at Arizona, of course, that's the first state my eyes go to. But I also find it really interesting that we look at other states like New York. New York has an even higher projected spend than Arizona. And I'm just curious about, is it just simply what's on the ballot? What kind of those marquee races? Or how do you determine, what those projections are going to be? Obviously California's bigger in population than Arizona, more media markets. But I'm just curious if you could sort of speak to the other states and what their projections are.
Yeah, so a piece of it with our projections come in not only with the competitive balance of a state, which is one of the most important factors. We partner with Cook Political Report, use their race rating. So if a state has a toss-up Senate race, that's going to see more projected spend than a state that doesn't. But another piece of it is going to be how expensive are the markets that reside within a particular state. So as you mentioned, a New York or a California, Los Angeles, New York, two of the most expensive markets in the country, are already going to drive higher spend. But then you also have this kind of congestion within the market of, say you have 2, 3, 4 competitive House races within a market. You also have a Senate race or a governor's race. You're then also fighting for all of that oxygen and inventory within that market, which can then drive up the rates to go and actually purchase ad space within the local kind of broadcast stations for cable buys. So that cross congestion also increases the amount that we project. And so that kind of really can fall into two different points. One being right ahead of a primary, you'll see an influx of spend. And then the 60 days before in general, you'll see that same uptick in spend.
One of the things that we have experienced in Arizona is that, obviously there's more spending, right? And there's more people that live here today than 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Is Arizona just a situation where the line is going to go up forever? And then related to that, what's the efficacy of all this money at the end of the day?
So it really is going to depend on what states are actually going to be impacted by the current political environment of the cycle. Overall, for cycle spend, we generally see kind of this upward trend really popping up post 2020. So in 2018, we saw just shy of $4 billion spent. 2020 is really kind of this breakthrough moment where we see around $9 billion spent on political ads nationwide. And then we kind of see this like steady incremental growth from that point on. You see a little bit of a fall off each midterm cycle, which we're projecting this year too, just so you don't have that vacuum of presidential money. But we're seeing this kind of steady incline above that $9, $10, $11 billion mark. For Arizona, we have seen this steady incline. It was around $425 million spent in 2020, $512 spent in 24. We're projecting a fall off down to 332. But again, that's just because there aren't these two marquee matchups at a statewide piece. As for the effectiveness of the ads, we're not kind of in the business of testing, are these ads effective? Our side really is that the more you spend, the higher visibility you have. And so you're kind of guaranteeing yourself this exposure.
When you're sitting at home and you're seeing these political ads, I mean, what's the one thing that a voter probably doesn't understand when they're looking at an ad about either what went into it or how those decisions were made? I mean, what is one thing that voters ought to know that they don't now know when they look at a political ad, from your perspective?
I think a big piece is for the ads where you have to disclose where it's coming from, which it isn't true of every media that they're buying on. So for the digital side of things, most of those are voluntarily disclosed. TV, cable side, there's regulated disclosure, but there is a way to go and learn a little bit more about who's backing those ads, where they're coming from. So I think there is more information out there to go and get informed on where the ads are coming from, the amount that's going behind it. And before I got into this industry, I had no idea about it.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Ballot AZ. I'm Gina Roberts.
And I'm Tom Collins. We'll see you next week.